After her grandfather's funeral, the atmosphere within the family shifted, with a weight that Anna could feel deep in her chest. She was 33, an architect from Seattle, and had always shared something with her grandfather that she never found with anyone else. He had been more than family. He had been her guide, her safe place, the person who understood her even in silence. He was the one who took her hand when she was a child and pointed to the eaves and moldings of old houses, who praised their quiet dignity. Together, they wandered through antique neighborhoods, and he taught her how to read buildings like they were books. She never forgot the long afternoons spent measuring beams in the family estate, sketching renovations no one else asked for. The house in Tacoma was more than a home to her. It was a promise. Her grandfather had spoken of it often, with a smile that reached his tired eyes. Once, while helping him fix his email, she'd caught a glimpse of a legal document bearing her name, his will. She hadn't read the details, but the message was clear. The house would be hers. His passing came quietly, in his sleep. The family gathered like shadows at the wake, dressed in black, murmuring memories as if they were currency. Her father avoided her eyes. Distant cousins hovered around the buffet table, exchanging hollow condolences. No one mentioned the house, but Anna could already feel the weight of their expectations circling it. At the reading of the will, her hands were still clasped, still waiting. The notary's voice was measured, neutral, unshakable. He named Harold, the uncle who rarely visited, who once called the house a rotting box with nostalgia problems, as the sole inheritor of the estate. Not a word about Anna. Not a line, not a clause, not even a footnote. Her breath caught in her throat. The silence that followed was louder than any gasp. She searched the room, looking for a crack in someone's composure, anything to explain what had just happened. But the smiles that followed were polite, restrained, and rehearsed. The house was gone, taken, and the family treated it as if it had never been hers to begin with. The first days after the will reading passed in a blur. Anna walked through them as if underwater, convincing herself there must be a mistake. Maybe her grandfather had changed his mind. Maybe Harold had helped him in ways she didn't know. But the thought didn't sit right. Her grandfather had been a man of deep integrity, and she could not silence the quiet alarm ringing inside her. Late at night, unable to sleep, she turned to the one place where the past might still speak: his old laptop. The password came to her fingers instinctively. On the hard drive, buried in a folder marked Personal, she found a scan of a will dated just 3 months before his death. Her name was there, clearly printed as the sole heir to the house. Her chest tightened. The document matched everything she remembered seeing that afternoon in his study, the afternoon he had smiled at her and said nothing at all. That version of the will was complete, notarized, and bore his electronic signature. The contrast between what she held now and what the family had presented was undeniable. This discovery shattered her denial. She reached out to Mr. Whitmore, the notary her grandfather had used for years. He remembered her immediately and confirmed that no updates had been made in the final months of her grandfather's life. No new signatures, no calls, no new paperwork. Suspicion became certainty. She hired a forensic handwriting expert to examine the newly submitted will and an IT consultant to analyze its digital fingerprint. They worked independently, but both returned with the same conclusion. The document had been forged. The signature was imitated. The file metadata had been tampered with. The report was cold, technical, and precise. But for Anna, it landed like fire. Her family had lied. They had gathered around her grandfather's death not to mourn him, but to rewrite his wishes. They had stolen not only her inheritance, but the final truth he had left behind. And now, she had proof. Anna moved with caution. She knew the truth, but understood the danger of confronting a lie without enough weight to crush it. She began gathering everything: timestamps from the digital will, certification letters from the handwriting analyst, and statements from the IT expert. She created folders, labeled meticulously, and stored backups in 3 separate locations. She returned to her grandfather's cloud storage, which remained untouched. Buried among financial spreadsheets and garden photos, she found videos recorded on his old phone. One of them showed him in the backyard, sitting in his favorite chair, talking about the house and how much it meant to him. He mentioned her by name, clearly stating his desire for her to have it. That video became her cornerstone. It wasn't legal proof, but it was emotional clarity. She added it to her growing archive and continued searching. She combed through emails, old texts, and calendar invites. Then, in a subfolder within his inbox, she found a thread that made her heart stop. Messages between Harold and Victoria, her cousin. The emails were short but incriminating. Victoria suggested ways to minimize legal exposure and mentioned removing Anna from the line of vision before the estate closes. There were discussions of dates, notary visits, and even drafts of a replacement will attached as Word documents. It was clear the forgery had been premeditated. Anna printed every email, annotated each one, and mapped a timeline. The deeper she dug, the more the conspiracy expanded. Harold was the instigator, but Victoria was an eager accomplice. There were signs that one of the family lawyers might have been involved as well, or at least complicit by omission. Each clue formed a web of quiet coordination. One detail wounded her more than the rest. In a reply Victoria sent late at night, she mentioned that Anna would never fight back because she still wanted her father's approval. That sentence echoed louder than any courtroom verdict. Her father knew. He hadn't signed documents or forged anything, but he had stood by and watched. Silence was his betrayal. Anna filed the lawsuit with quiet determination. She didn't announce it to the family, didn't warn or explain. The legal documents were delivered by a process server on a rainy morning, and within hours, phones across the family chain lit up with confusion, panic, and denial. By the end of the day, Harold had retained counsel, and Victoria had gone silent. The courtroom was modest, with old wooden benches and stained carpet. Her relatives sat in a row like spectators at a funeral. On the first day, they laughed and whispered, treating the hearing as an overreaction. Their attorneys framed Anna's claim as emotional and misguided, the product of grief clouding reason. On the second day, Anna's lawyer introduced the expert witnesses. The handwriting analyst testified with precision. The IT specialist explained the altered metadata. The notary confirmed he had never updated the will. Slowly, the room shifted. Laughter disappeared. Faces grew still. The judge listened closely, rarely interrupting, his pen moving steadily across yellow paper. The turning point came on day 4. Anna submitted the video. The lights dimmed, and the screen filled with the familiar image of her grandfather in the garden. He spoke with clarity, naming Anna as the rightful heir. His voice was frail but unmistakable. He said she understood the house not as property, but as memory, as legacy. Silence fell over the courtroom when the video ended. For a full minute, no one moved. The judge asked for a recess to review the full evidence file in chambers. The attorneys packed their papers in silence. Harold looked down. Victoria turned away. Anna sat still, her hands folded, her expression unreadable. The final day was brief. The judge returned with a written statement. He ruled the contested will a forgery. All claims made under it were void. The estate, including the house and remaining financial assets, were to be transferred to Anna in accordance with the original and valid testament found on record. There were no appeals made in that room. After the verdict, everything grew quiet. No one called, no one wrote. The same relatives who once filled family dinners with noise now passed her in town with stiff nods or avoided her gaze entirely. The silence wasn't peaceful, it was heavy, filled with everything they refused to say. The trial had ended, but the distance between them remained. The house, now legally hers, stood unchanged on the edge of the neighborhood. Its windows still faced the same trees, its porch still creaked in the wind. But inside, it felt different. The warmth of old memories had been replaced by a colder echo, the kind that follows broken trust. One day an envelope arrived in the mailbox with her father's handwriting. It was short. He wrote that justice had been served, that sometimes justice mattered more than blood. There were no apologies, no reflection, just acknowledgement written like a business note and signed without warmth. Anna read it once and folded it away. She didn't respond. She had no desire to argue, to forgive, or to reopen wounds that had already begun to scar. The silence between them wasn't cruel anymore. It was clean. It was final. She chose not to disturb it. The house needed repairs. The roof leaked in the east wing, and the garden was overgrown. But she left everything as it was. She didn't repaint. She didn't modernize. She preserved each room in the memory of her grandfather. Even the peeling wallpaper stayed, like a quiet act of loyalty. She spent long hours walking through the halls, running her hand along the worn banister, remembering the man who taught her to see beauty in what others dismissed. This house had been a promise. Now it was also a truth, not about property, but about the value of standing firm when everyone else fades. Anna knew she was alone now. The family she grew up with had turned their faces away. But the house stood with her, unchanged and unashamed. In reclaiming it, she had not only honored a legacy, she had reclaimed herself. And in that quiet, she finally found peace. 1 year later, Anna turned the house into something more than a memory. She opened it to the public, not as a museum, but as a space for thought and creation. The main hall became a library, lined with shelves of architectural history and design. The sunroom became a workshop, filled with drafting tables, tools, and quiet corners where people could come and build something of their own. She named it after her grandfather, though she didn't include his last name. It wasn't meant to be about legacy in the traditional sense. It was about the kind of legacy that lives in silence, in the care taken to preserve a space, in the quiet respect for craftsmanship, in the joy of solitude. It became a sanctuary for artists, students, and anyone in need of stillness. She hosted small events, lectures on preservation, student showcases, quiet open hours where people could sit and sketch. No family members attended the opening. No flowers arrived from cousins, no notes from uncles. The absence didn't sting anymore. It was just air, empty, but breathable. She didn't need their presence to validate what she had built. One afternoon in early spring, she opened the mailbox and found a small envelope with uneven handwriting. Inside was a short letter from a 6th grader named Milo. He wrote that he came every Saturday with his sketchbook, that he wanted to be an architect, and that her house was the most peaceful place he had ever been. She read it twice, her fingers resting on the paper, heart still. She didn't cry. She just smiled. A quiet, complete kind of smile that had nothing to prove and nothing to defend. That note said more than any court ruling or inheritance document ever could. It was a sign that the house was still alive. The rooms no longer echoed with betrayal. They carried laughter, pencil scratches, the murmur of pages turning. Light moved across the floorboards the way it always had. But now it warmed new hands, new ideas. The space had become what it was always meant to be, a refuge, a workshop, a seed for something better. Anna walked through the halls at dusk, listening to the silence she had earned. The air smelled like wood and books and clean dust. She didn't lock the doors anymore. She didn't need to. The real key had never been metal. It had been courage. And now it lived inside her.